This week, Will and I discuss Mark Russell and Richard Pace's Second Coming, Only Begotten Son. More adventures of Jesus with Superman analog Sunstar. How does the second volume of this series from Ahoy Comics stand up against the first one? First, if you appreciate the work we do on this podcast, we'd love it if you'd support the show at patreon.com/deconcomics for as little as $2 a month. All patrons get our bi-weekly videos featuring 20th century TV trivia quizzes, more perks and bonus content at higher donation levels, including discussions of MCU movies and Lee Ditko Spider-Man stories, and help us meet our goals to unlock the earliest episodes of our podcast and put them all back in the feed. Pledge your support now at patreon.com/deconcomics. This is Tim.
This is Will.
And this is Deconstructing Comics. Welcome to Deconstructing Comics. This is Tim in Tokyo. We've got Will with us from, remind me, Ohio?
Cleveland, Ohio.
Yeah, okay. And as we did...
Jewel of Lake Erie.
As we did, I think it's been about a year and a half ago, when we talked about the first series. We're talking about the second series of Second Coming. So, the Second Coming of Second Coming, yes.
Yes, indeed.
By Mark Russell with Richard Pace on art, published by Ahoy Comics. So, actually, Tom Peyer, who's the editor of Ahoy and writes some of the comics too, we had him on To the Batpoles recently to talk about his The Wrong Earth series, which is sort of, copyright avoiding Batman story. Yeah, I was asking about kind of Ahoy's approach. So they have a lot of titles, but they can't afford to put all of them out at once. So they'll have like a 6-issue miniseries, like a season of something, and then stop that and put out something else for 6 issues, and then maybe come back to the other one later and do another 6 issues. So that's what's happened here. And of course, the concept with this series is Jesus meets a superhero, and the first series had a lot of interaction between them, but you were saying before we started recording, this series, they tend to kind of have their own separate storylines and don't really cross paths very much.
Yeah, there's that lack of interplay between the demigod and the superhero. If those two are parallel sociological phenomena, some of the beauty of the first clutch of comics was how those two concepts really do match up and interplay across time and culture. But now they're separated not only by their own storylines, but also by little historical vignettes that are popped in to sort of tee up the theme of each episode.
Yeah. So yeah, sometimes the Sunstar bits, I was like, I'm not sure this really has anything to do with the theme of the issue. Like, in the last issue, he comes up against that dictator again, who we saw in the first series, and, it's amusing. It's the comedy aspect of the story, but I couldn't find a way that tied in with the theme of the issue.
Yeah, they made him the high school jock bully archetype, and therefore somehow like tangentially responsible for grooming the supervillain into his life of revenge against the common people of the earth. But I one thing that I think did connect the two of them, Jesus and Sunstar, was an embrace of a certain nihilism. It's deeply overt in Jesus's commentary, and he goes out and tells people, like, God doesn't love you, you suck. And with Sunstar, when he opens up his office hours and takes suggestions, the suggestion that sticks in him, that haunts him, is leave Earth and never come back, because eventually you're going to get angry And when that happens, you have the power to wipe us all out. So I think what connects them is being haunted by this embrace of, I don't know, needing to remove gods, of growing up, of humanity taking the step to self-reliance for their own future. But it's highly subtextual.
Yeah, I don't know. I enjoyed reading this series, but I also struggled with it because it was like I said, it's always so dense with Russell, and so many things that he's able to, like these things that really feel like pearls of wisdom, but there are so many of them. And when I interviewed him, he attributed that to being able to go back and edit himself and kind of hone the points so that they're stronger. But I don't know. I don't think every writer will do that. I mean, a lot of writers of comics don't really have a point. It's punching is the point.
Yeah,
but
certainly.
Yeah.
Not that there isn't a deep soft spot in my heart for punching.
Although sometimes I felt like it was a little excessively pointed, like it was a little on the nose, as they say.
Yes.
Like, okay, but or sometimes maybe I'm just too optimistic, but the bad behavior of the general people in the story seems like a little obvious, or a little bit more than I really believe would happen. Like all the people rooting for the guy to jump off the bridge in one of the issues, and when he doesn't, then they're all disappointed.
Yeah. I waited for this. Agreed. And it was a more belligerent read, I think, than I was expecting.
Mm-hmm.
But what and to say that there's pearls, those pearls were, as you say, quite on the nose. But the thread that ties those pearls, to me, and this is my main critique of the series, felt completely segregated from the first run of the story. And to me, this is a massive missed opportunity. As I have sat with the first run of Second Coming, I find that I like it more. It's aged well. It's mellowed in the mind. I reread it in advance of the second round, and I felt that my affection for it increased. There's a vulnerability to it that was unique and refreshing, and it's not an attractive vulnerability. Like lots of times you can there is such a thing as a romantic attractive vulnerability. This is an ugly vulnerability. This is a vulnerability that does not make you friends, and it's beautiful. It's risky, and I salute that. But it ends with God and Lucifer starting to make friends, patch everything up, get their relationship back on track, and then Jesus up and knifes Satan, kills him dead. And this is in the last pages. So we don't get any of the repercussions of this cosmic celestial outcome. And you can't do that.
Yeah, I mean, I'd kind of forgotten about that because I didn't go back and read the first series. I guess it is mentioned briefly in this one. But yeah, that's a good point, because it doesn't seem to matter at all. And the message here is basically, we have to find our own happiness, and there's nothing about, why was it consequential to kill the devil? Well, in the Christian context, it's that you've saved humanity, basically, from temptation and whatever, and now it's like, well, whatever.
Yeah, but let's wipe all that out. Let's even if we bring it down to the level of our characters, like to have Jesus use lethal violence to put him in the punching seat.
Yeah.
is a transformation of character
Yeah,
that
he's now the
cannot
Punisher.
go unaddressed. He's not the Punisher. He healed the slave in Gethsemane. He refused to allow his disciples to fight for him. He accepted torture and death. If he is going to take up the sword, literally, there are consequences for that character. That arc must be addressed. Then what does it mean for his relationship with God? Because God was getting back on track with Lucifer. They were going to be friends again. And does he just not care? Is this a non-issue to him? That should put a wedge between their relationship. That should increase the tension and insert drama. And we don't get any of that. Both of these characters are reset to zero.
Yeah.
When we first encounter Jesus, his biggest problem is he's got to move out of the baby's room at Sunstar's pad.
Yeah.
Not, let alone the fact, what happens to hell.
Right. Well, in this series, hell is just the slums of heaven, basically. So it's not a place that the devil even oversees or apparently ever oversaw to begin with. So what was the function of the devil in the first place in this version?
Yeah. Well, they do show him being spectacularly cast down in the pages of the first one. So they're certainly riffing on the established imagery and iconography.
Mm-hmm. And I felt like maybe less than the first one. You've read the first one again, and I didn't. But it seemed like that one had more of a through line through the 6 issues, where this one, like the first issue, it's all about on Sunstar's home planet when he was a baby. And, of course, he's a Superman analog, so it's basically Superman's origin. But it's mainly about his parents and what they were going through at that time. And, of course, there are some finely honed points made in the first issue too about like people spending too much time planning for the future and not thinking about the present enough. So that's all just kind of self-contained to the first issue. Although it got me to thinking though that Sunstar says something about not knowing his parents, but like Superman, how does he know his own origin story?
Yeah, doesn't it come coded on his
yeah,
crystal
maybe.
in the Fortress of Solitude?
Of course, we've had various versions of his parents coming back to life, I think, because it's a superhero comic and it's endless. But so you got to do something new. And then the second issue is more about like Jesus ends up in a Christian theme park and what happens there, and then that sort of leads into the next issue where he meets the goofball CEO of Christway Enterprises, who wants to send him out on tour and give him a makeover. And then the last 3 issues are kind of more one piece, but the first 3 issues are now kind of, set aside for the most part. So, yeah, I would have liked something that carried more through all 6 issues.
Agreed. It was vignettes rather than a unified graphic novel, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I wasn't sure how I felt about the message of the last 3 issues, where it's like, I'm kind of agnostic myself these days, but still, it's like to have God and Jesus saying, whatever, just kind of, it didn't really matter if you sinned on earth. That's why you don't know anybody up here now, because you were too good and you could have enjoyed life more. And sinning helps us socialize more and get to know people. Like, okay. But I'm like, is this really Jesus and God saying these things?
It seemed kind of harsh too, because
yeah,
like I don't think that the authors are saying that this guy who's now getting parked into the boring sector of heaven should have been out robbing banks and harming people. But the point is, like, he probably should have been out partying a little bit and meeting people, maybe like shooting some pool and gambling, going on a bender every once in a while, and I don't know, call me a modern sensibility, but that's not my definition of sin.
That's an interesting point. So say more about that. It's not your definition of sin.
Right. Certainly, like wringing your hands in silence and darkness and solitude because you are terrified of drawing the ire of God is wasting your mortal life. That is certainly something to be condemned. But like the opposite of that, like going out, living it up, maybe sometimes to excess, I would not score that as sinful. I would score hurting people as sinful. I would score causing harm to oneself in a rigorous and habitual way sinful. Certainly enjoying the pain of others, going out and seeking to cause pain to others would be sinful. But like partying is harmless, and it really should be considered such. And that's what I think God was saying. But he was still using the language of sin, the very language of sin that Jesus is attacking in the megachurch segment. So maybe there's a little bit of internal inconsistency there.
So yeah, this character George, who is one of the senior citizens on a bus going to a casino that goes off a cliff in the earthquake, and they all die and go to heaven. I mean, yeah, his definition of sin has been, dancing and swearing and things that, don't really hurt anybody. Yeah, that's not my definition of sin either, really. But yeah, I guess it's not in this, at least in this telling, it's not God's version of sin either. I mean, I think there are still people like that who believe that those things are sinful, even as they exclude other races and and genders and so forth from their community, which is more harmful. It would be nice maybe to do more, for Russell to do more on that theme. Maybe. What do you think?
Possibly so. I think we should swing back and address the sort of megachurch segment. And I don't have like a lot of information on this, but I feel like the young CEO might have been based on the son of Jim Baker, Jim and Tammy's son.
Oh.
I know at some point, like in the early 2000s, he had like the affectations of a punk rocker or like a metal kid, and he was like alt rocking up the church or some such tomfoolery.
Yeah, this kid is dressed like 1970s Elton John.
Right. But but that sort of somewhat more sophisticated and cynical manipulation attitude might be a part of that. And certainly the idea of this giant electronic church structure is part of it too. And I have to wonder how much social cachet such things still wield in the current age. I know that it was once powerful, and I have friends who have been involved in that as kids, and it hasn't been positive, and it's been quite the opposite of positive. And this is not the author's words; these are my own. But I think that when you have ready-made fellowship, total ready-made acceptance, but the price of that is you have to transform yourself in some way, shape, or form in order to get that total acceptance and fellowship, the underlying message is there's something wrong with you. If you can't get this massive ready-made acceptance by being yourself is the problem. And that's why it sort of carries forth as a pain for people years and years down the road. So I suppose that like this is a legit target to go after, but I don't think that it is relevant in the here and now. I think he's going after a passé social ill rather than I'm sure there's many types of modern religiosity that can be targeted, from self-help gurus to whatnot. But these guys had the flavor to me of a 20th century style electronic church.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of a fashionable comedian target in the late 80s, early 90s, after all the scandals that had happened with televangelists. I mean, I don't live in America, so I'm not quite sure how much those guys, or those kinds of guys, show up anymore. I mean, Baker and who was the guy? Oh, Jimmy Swaggart. They're not really around anymore, I don't think, but...
No, there's a guy running around named Joel Osteen, I think. I don't know how much he pushes religion overtly, but then you got, Tony Robbins, who's essentially holding church without mentioning God. So there are contemporary analogs that would be more valid targets because they are at play in the here and now.
Coming up, more of what we liked and didn't like about Second Coming, Only Begotten Son. Don't forget you can help to unlock classic early episodes of Deconstructing Comics, help me return all the old episodes to this podcast feed, get videos of my brother Paul and me discussing 20th century TV trivia, and at the $4 level, get access to hours of additional full-length podcasts. At the $10 level, you can review the book of your choice with me here on this show. Support Deconstructing Comics and our other shows at patreon.com/deconcomics. Or you can send a one-time donation via PayPal to mail@deconstructingcomics.com. We appreciate your support.
You like cheap comic books, right? Well, I'm Professor Allen, and I talk about cheap comic books on the Quarterbin Podcast. In every episode, I'll dissect a single comic from my collection, as long as I paid no more than 25 cents for the issue. Forget about $4 new comics that you can read in 4 minutes, or crossover events that can cost $100 to collect. Join me in the Quarterbin, where even bad comics are a bargain, and good ones are a steal. The Quarterbin Podcast is part of the Relatively Geeky Podcast Network. Visit us at relativelygeekypodcast.blogspot.com or search Relatively Geeky or Quarterbin Podcast in iTunes. I guarantee it'll be worth every penny.
I just wanted to mention a little bit. I think, in the scenes that are supposed to take place in earlier eras, including biblical times, I think Russell is good at putting what they're saying into more modern language, like when it shows Jesus with the Pharisees having dinner, and Mary Magdalene comes in, and one of the Pharisees says, "What's that skank doing here? Security!" And it's really modern way to basically what they said in the Bible. But if you use that highfalutin language, it puts kind of a distance between you and the reader, I think.
Yeah, I enjoyed that too. I thought that it popped.
Yeah.
Those bits had effervescence for sure.
Mm-hmm. What else do we need to say about this?
Well, I've got a short list of some good ideas and some ideas I thought weren't that good.
Okay.
So some good ideas from Jesus's preaching. He says, "Don't tell the truth, be the truth." I thought very nice, very consistent, absolutely supported by the material as presented. Jesus says, "Is God getting bored with you?" That's a cool idea. That's an interesting idea. Are we living up to our potential? Are we surprising the maker? That's a challenge to it, and it's a worthy challenge. I like that one. He says compassion is a form of humility. That's a nice subtlety, and it's one that I like a lot. And I also think that the office hours for Sunstar was a really interesting idea, especially coupled with the leave Earth and never come back comment.
Yeah.
Because that does capture the problem of superpowers in a poignant way. And I like that it was sort of an old guy who came in with this comment that he wasn't looking for something or some advantage, some prize. He was taking a larger view.
So did
bad
you
ideas?
find some bad ideas? Yeah.
I did. So bad ideas. The first one is we discussed a little bit. That's bagging on the electronic church is a little bit passé. There are other social forces at play, and throwing the second coming of Jesus into that mix would be more risky. This was completely safe. No one is going to stand up for these folks. There's nothing transgressive about it. Next, God is disgusted with the human race. And I'm going to read a quote here. Jesus says, God has left. He's disgusted with the human race. He thinks he can do better, create better beings. And to be honest, he's probably right. That's what I came to Earth to tell you the first time around. Well, I'm not a theologian, but I'm fairly certain that is an incorrect statement. I'm well enough acquainted with the New Testament to say conclusively that is the theme of Christ's ministry is not God is disgusted with you. So,
yeah, it's God wants to save you, and he sacrifices his son to save the human race.
So once again, if you're going to critique Christianity, and there is ample space to do so, don't strawman it. Don't misrepresent what you're going for. Get it right and critique it legitimately. And that pervasive nihilism, I think, is found throughout, especially when we catch up with Jesus at the end of the story, where he's essentially completely apathetic. And again, the whole time, like, because I was very much touched by the first round, I'm thinking, bring in the character arc. Where's the consequences? Where's the blowback and the fallout from the whole Satan business?
Yeah, well, I would like a little bit more badass Jesus here, because I mean, he killed the devil, as you said, but in this one he seems so kind of easily befuddled by situations. Like he doesn't quite understand what's going on half the time. And yeah, I would like him to be a little more aware and assertive, I guess. And
yeah, he's almost like an adorable dope with a dark streak.
Yeah, I'm trying to put my finger on what it reminds me of. Like if you see a time travel story where some other historical character or historical figure has nothing to do with religion shows up in the 21st century and they don't understand what's going on. I don't know, George Washington or something. But still, I mean, even if they don't understand what's going on, I don't know that they would be quite so naive as this Jesus seems to be.
Yeah, and that's part of the charm, that he's just going to walk around and wait for something to happen, and invariably does. And like there's something to be said for that. I think that's an adventure theme that maybe does parallel the New Testament a little bit. But yeah, we don't like him passive. Like he's highly reactive. I want to see Jesus in a more motivated frame of mind, and he gets progressively more apathetic.
Yeah, and yeah, he's even at one point almost ready to give up on being on Earth. He goes back to heaven. He thinks he might stay there, and then he is a little bit more motivated at the end, or a little more upbeat, and he goes back and he joins the disciples that he has in the story. But yeah, I like him to be more proactive. I did like the scene where he talks the guy out of committing suicide. I thought that was good. So did I. And
standout scene. And I like the disciples in general.
And he's got those handcuffs on that when the Christian theme park Roman centurion police almost arrest him, and they put the handcuff on him, but they never got it on themselves. So he takes off, and then he puts the handcuff on the suicidal guy. What's his name? Phil, I think.
Yeah, Phil.
And says, you can jump if you want to, but if you go, I'll go with you. So, yeah, and that really felt true to the source material.
Yeah, good scene through and through, and I liked his interplay with the disciples. It would have been nice to see that developed a little bit, and I'm sure that there will be opportunity to do that in future installments.
Right, yeah, because it's pretty clear that there's going to be more, both from the editor's note at the end and from when I interviewed Russell a year ago. I listened to that this morning, and he said he was hoping for, 3 or 4 volumes of this. I don't know, do you think we need more?
I don't know. I can't speak for what his ultimate plan will be, but I don't necessarily find myself thirsting for more.
Yeah, I kind of feel like, with the baby born at the end of this one, like, it feels like a good place to end it, but unless they're going to go back and look at the ramifications of killing the devil, that would be interesting.
Yeah.
It would really change the status quo in this book.
Yeah, and what do you do with Sunstar as a parent? How does the last son of Zirconia respond to having an infant?
Mm-hmm. But yeah, also I think they do need to go back to having more interaction between Sunstar and Jesus. In this, it's basically just as roommates.
Yeah, it not only is their relationship the core of the story, it's also it's the tag. It's the point of the whole thing. It's demigod plus superhero.
Yeah, and how are they alike and how are they different? Any comments on the art? I mean, it's just like in the first one, where there are 2 different styles, where one is used for... It seemed like it was more like flashback type scenes, or like things that happened in biblical times, or there are a couple of other points in history that show up, and those are drawn in a sketchier style, where the modern stuff is mostly in this more cartoony style.
Yeah, absolutely, and even the modern stuff here, I thought had a little bit more of a surrealistic feel than the first time around, and I think both editions were well served by their art style.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the flashback stuff, particularly the Crusader pieces, they almost had a Bill Sienkiewicz kind of feel to them, which I appreciated greatly. I like those harsh lines. Then that speaks to my soul.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was an interesting bit. In what issue was that? Issue...
I think that one was 3.
Yeah, where the Crusaders come in 1099. They're looking for gold. They cut off the thumb of a prisoner and declare it the thumb of Saint Matthew, and it's a relic. And it comes back in issue 6 too. There's a through line. And then later Saladin comes and they put all their faith in the thumb of Saint Matthew, and it doesn't save them. So, yeah, that was all interesting. Also, in that issue, I liked Sunstar's line, "What in Canadian hell?" I'm not sure what that means. But I liked it anyway.
Yes, it does sound very restrained, yet highly vulgar.
I don't know how Canadian hell is different from anybody else's hell, but is that being in the Great White North? I don't know.
A lot of fries drenched in gravy, but not enough because it's hell.
Or it's being hit with a hockey stick, maybe. I don't know. Okay, well, yeah, like I said, there's so much in the story. I don't know that there's need to go through all of it, but how did you feel about the series overall? I mean, did you enjoy reading it, or were you too annoyed by the lack of follow through on the Satan bit?
I was annoyed by the lack of follow through on the first series, and when I tried to bracket that off in my brain and just accept this as its own separate artistic encounter, I found some of those on the nose pearls of a a little bit harsh. I felt somewhat bludgeoned, undeservingly. Sometimes the reader deserves a little bit of slapping around, and this time I don't think I did.
Yeah, I think I felt a little bit that way too on the second point, that some things were just a little too on the nose, too perfect for what he was trying to do, and like kind of manipulating things to fit exactly what he tried to say, where it didn't quite work in the real world. Like I said, like the crowd disappointed that the guy didn't jump.
Yeah, that's some black-hearted ugliness thrown in.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I enjoyed it overall. Maybe I enjoyed the first one better. I'll have to go back and read it, but read it a second time. Okay.
Yeah, that's my final takeaway, I think, from having gone through this last round, is the first one is really great, and I strongly recommend it, and it's even better by contrast than over time.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. Okay. Second Coming, Only Begotten Son is published by Ahoy Comics. You can help Deconstructing Comics, Critiquing Comics, and all our podcasts by joining us on Patreon at patreon.com/deconcomics, and go to deconstructingcomics.com to connect to us on Twitter, Facebook, or YouTube, to shop on Amazon to support the show, and to find links to subscribe to the podcast. Our theme is by J.B. Anderton. If you're looking for some constructive feedback on your comic, send it to us and we'll critique it on our spin-off podcast, Critiquing Comics. Send it to mail@deconstructingcomics.com. We'll read at least 30 pages of it and critique it on the show. Next week on Critiquing Comics, Adam and I critique a kickstarted anthology called Producing the End of the World. Till then, this is Tim, and thanks for listening to Deconstructing Comics.